Today we're going to be looking at 10 animals that were frozen in time. One look at these critters and you'll begin to wonder whether they're still alive or not. We're also going to try to understand and figure out what their last seconds of existence looked like, just before they froze into eternal sleep. Now, I would like to preface this, some of these are going to be a little sad looking, so that's just a warning for you. With all that said and done, let's begin, shall we? Number 10. Frozen Dog. They say dogs are a man's best friend, and for that reason, it was hard for animal cruelty officials in Canada to determine who could have caused harm to this family dog. They found a dog frozen in a block of ice in front of a man's house in British Columbia. The owner of the house, who was considered the main suspect, said he had no idea who had done this. In fact, he claimed he didn't even recognize the dog. In a place as cold as Canada, a dog can freeze to death in a very short amount of time. However, the officials determined this dog died before being frozen. They also determined that the dog belonged to someone since it had a healthy weight and height, so it was definitely not an unlucky stray dog. Unfortunately, a lot of cases like this one happen in Canada during the winter. Sometimes it's because an owner's genuine mistake, and sometimes it's a mere act of cruelty. I think people should be more mindful of dogs. If the winter is sometimes unbearable for us humans, I can only imagine what these little ones feel during these cold months. Number 9. Frozen Coyote. Photographer Sabine Canyon gained a lot of attention back in 2008 after taking the photo of a frozen coyote on the side of the road. The animal was found stiff, sitting up on a solid position. The winter of 2008 was one of the coldest winters ever recorded. The temperature on that day was around minus 22 degrees, which was more than enough to freeze one of these animals to death. This poor little thing. He easily looks like one of those animals you could find at an exhibit in a natural history museum. I wonder if he was chasing after food, or if he was just enjoying his surroundings. His position indicates that he definitely didn't see his death coming. The change of temperature must have been very drastic in such a short amount of time. Number 8. Frozen Fish. And here's actually one of the coolest photos in this set that I'm actually pretty sure I've shown in the previous video. This ice wall of fish made everyone go crazy on social media a while ago. This happens in a lake in South Dakota when a school of fish were riding above a wave and literally froze in time. No one has been able to give a concrete explanation of how this happened, but my guess would be that the temperature dropped in a matter of seconds, and it was fast enough to freeze all the fish in the middle of the rising wave. On the other hand, some experts believe that this phenomenon happened due to the lack of oxygen in the bottom of the lake. This forced the fish and other living beings to come to the surface just to get frozen in a very unusual way. Photographer Kelly Preheim, who is the one who documented this crazy moment, says that there were way more fish than what you see in these pictures. She confidently says that there were actually thousands of them. Number 7. Frozen Donkey. A lot of the stories I have today would not reach us if it wasn't for the work of some talented photographers who always have their eyes wide open to spot these crazy things that happen in nature. Our next story starts with Svein Nordrum, a 54-year-old photographer who went out for some skating on Lake Bindingsvann. This was right out of Oslo in Norway. Little did she know that she was about to spot a frozen herd of donkeys that would interrupt her skating session. But instead of taking pictures, Svein immediately called a rescue team to come and do something about the situation. Luckily, some of the donkeys were alive, even though they were already frozen. The rescue team picked up these donkeys and took them to an animal shelter to warm up, eat, and received a veterinarian's attention. It is a relief to know at least some of these frozen animals were able to survive in the midst of these terrible temperatures. Number 6. Frozen Frog. Those donkeys were not the only victims to Norway's unbearable cold conditions. We also have this frog that can easily fool you and make you think he's sleeping. But he's actually frozen. A rise in temperature in the Nordic country tricked the frog into thinking that it was time to come out of hibernation. Unfortunately, once the frog was out, the temperature had a drastic drop. The frog was about to jump across the lake and start mating, but nature got in the way. The lake froze and the frog tried to go back to hibernation in the middle of the lake. However, the cold temperatures were unbearable for this amphibian and he froze to death. Number 5. Frozen Elk. And once again, another animal got frozen in Norway. Big shock. This time, though, it's a bigger animal, an elk in the middle of Lake Bodo in the northern part of the country. The poor animal was found by Ingir Schulberg, a 47-year-old woman who was skating in the middle of the lake when she found the elk. At first, she just saw antlers sticking out of the ice on which she was skating. She then noticed there was a frozen elk inside the ice and the animal was completely frozen. Apparently, the elk started walking on the lake a bit too early in the winter, which made it so easy for him to fall through the ice and then wasn't able to get out. As the winter continued, the lake froze over completely, and the elk got stuck there for the entire season. You can just imagine all the tourists and locals who came to look at the frozen elk. It did become the town's main attraction, if a little morbid. There was not much they could do, since after all it had been months since the elk fell through the ice, so I guess they might as well enjoy it while they can. Number 4. Frozen fighting moose. Something very impressive about these animals is that a lot of them freeze right in the middle of action. They obviously weren't expecting for a temperature drop to freeze them in time, at least so quickly. Such is the case of these moose that were found frozen in the middle of a battle. Back over in 2016, a group of hikers were on a trip around a village in the west coast of Alaska, and during their journey they came across these 2 frozen moose who had their antlers locked together. That was obviously a sign of one intense battle. Although since mating season was already over, it can be implied that the moose could have been fighting over territory or the love of a female moose. It's more than likely that the animals fell into the water after one of them got wounded, and since their antlers were locked, the 2 drowned then froze together. That was definitely not the best timing for a fight. It must have been pretty shocking for the hikers to come across this during their hike, but it must have been even more shocking for the 2 moose. Number 3. Frozen cave lion of Siberia. So far we've talked about present-day animals that froze in a matter of seconds and were discovered a few hours or days after the incident. But the next animal on this list is one that went extinct quite a while ago. It is a cub of a cave lion of Siberia discovered back over in 2017. And like many of the other animals on this list, he was fully frozen. While this animal is thought to be at least 20,000 years old, it doesn't seem like time passed over him. The little lion was found frozen in Siberian permafrost, with his eyes closed and his head resting on his paws under his chin. The animal probably died at the peak of the Ice Age, but it was well preserved by ice during all of this time. This finding was so impressive, you can even see the baby lion's expression on his face. And if you're into fossils and animals that went extinct, you might find this story rather familiar. That's because there was another case of frozen cubs that were discovered a couple of years before the one I just showed you. There were 2 cubs, younger than this one actually. These 2 were called Yulian and Dina. Apparently they were 2 weeks old when they died. This finding helped researchers to have a look at their internal organs and learn more about a species that is now gone. Now it's time for the day's best pick. The picture I have today is one of an animal that a lot of us love on this channel. We've seen them in our videos about animal babies and in the one about crazy pets, and I know a lot of you adore them, so let's get sad. Given the fact that a lot of them live in cold countries, it really shouldn't surprise you that they also made it to this list, however. Number 2. Frozen fox. There are many stories about frozen foxes, but the one I'm going to share with you today starts in 2017. This is when Franz Stell, a hunter in Germany, went out near the Danube and found a huge block of ice with a frozen fox inside of it. Franz thinks that the animal fell into the water and froze to his death. A few seconds after that, all the water around the fox froze as well. But if you hear Franz's story, you'll realize that such sights are not uncommon. He says such things happen a lot during the winter. His list of other frozen animals that he has spotted includes a wild boar and a deer. If you're curious about what the frozen fox looks like, you can visit Franz Stell's family hotel in Fringeden. The frozen animal stands there in memory of all the poor animals that lose their lives to the cold winter. And since frozen foxes are quite common, here goes another story. This time it's actually in Sweden. It happened when a man named Jeffrey Sandstrom went ice skating in the central part of the country. He then looked down and saw a frozen fox who probably fell through while walking on a semi-frozen lake. Unfortunately, no one was around when the poor fox fell down, so the animal got stuck there. If you do go out into the woods during wintertime, make sure you keep your eyes wide open. You don't know what animal could be out there in need of your help.
I saved the best for last, but first, I have a quick challenge that takes only 5 seconds to complete. If you can leave a like and subscribe within the next 5 seconds, you'll get 10 years of amazing luck. Just try it, it really works.
And it's time for number 1. Frozen mammoth. And at the top of this list, I have an animal that will make you realize how ice is effective in preserving things not for just a couple of months, but years. Actually, a couple thousand of years, if it's done right at least. The famous woolly mammoth, which existed more than 30,000 years ago, was found frozen in Siberia back in 2013. The preservation of its body was so impressive that you could even see some hair and body parts intact. Woolly was presented to the world in public display in Yokohama, Japan. Her body has helped scientists to understand the past. Some of them even claim that the blood they found beneath the animal's carcass can help them bring these animals back to life in the future. Could that be possible? I certainly hope not, because there's like 5 dinosaur movies that prove that's probably a bad idea. I don't care if it's an herbivore, I'm pretty sure something will go wrong. And those are all the frozen animals I have for you today. Which one of them was the most impressive? What would you do if you saw a frozen animal in the wild? Would you even be able to stand a drastic drop of temperature? Or do you prefer hot weather? Let us know in the comment section below. With all that said and done, that's our video for today, and I will see you all next time. Later, everybody.